There is a place in northern Minnesota which is said to have nearly every legend ever told. From Bigfoot, ghosts, and aliens to cults, ghost cars, a suicide bridge, and even Jason Voorhees himself. Looking at this creepy set of gravel roads surrounded by thousands of trees, no trespassing signs, and random dead ends, it's not hard to see why so many people claim this place is paranormal. This is the Vergas Trails. Today I'm going to go through some of the legends one at a time and look at stories surrounding them. Some might call him Bigfoot, but around these parts, he's known only as the Hairy Man of Vergas. Talk to most people in Vergas and they have either heard a story of the Hairy Man from someone they know, or they have seen the Hairy Man in person.
Out of this building came this, what I've always described as larger than what I would consider a human being, covered with hair, head, face, body, and bare feet.
Whether it's cars being attacked in the dead of the night, people being chased out of the woods, to deranged growls in the woods, they have all been attributed to the Hairy Man. So could it be that Bigfoot has been hiding in these Minnesota woods this whole time? Let's look more into the history first. Sightings of the Hairy Man date back as far as the early 1970s. A woman was wandering the woods when she came across a very hairy man who only spoke in grunts. He then proceeded to chase her away on a snowmobile. Another story from the 90s told of a man who was exploring the graveyard where he saw a very hairy man with a ball cap and a dog with him. When the hairy man noticed him, he gave chase. Most stories from these times describe more of a man. Some people describe him as more of a hermit with long hair and a long beard. They describe him more as a man that wants to be left alone rather than this big bulky creature. But as years go on, most people describe the hairy man as a creature more like Bigfoot. So could the hairy man have grown into this creature? Was it always a creature to begin with? Or has the tale been embellished more as time has gone on? Maybe the hairy man never existed in the first place. Whatever it is, if you hear a strange growl alone in the woods, you might want to hope that it's a bear and not the hairy man. Some claim that the Vergas Trails is the place of a killing rampage by the real-life Jason Voorhees. Deep in this forest is a Christian summer camp, also known as Camp Cherith. The legend says that this real live Jason Voorhees went on a murderous rampage at this summer camp, but was managed to be killed at Camp Cherith and is now buried in an unmarked grave in the graveyard that sits next to Camp Cherith. It is said that at midnight on Halloween, Jason comes from beneath the grave, and the sound of a chainsaw can be heard. It is also said that the unmarked gravestone will be visible. The grave will be empty. Living inside a strange 8-sided house deep in the woods that is only visible on certain nights are a group of people known only as the White Sheets. The White Sheets can only be described as a cult. To know if you found the right house, look for a white van parked outside of it. But if they are home, I suggest you stay far away from this group. They are described as a group of people that run around in white sheets or robes. They are said to try to cause car crashes, kill livestock, have rituals in the woods, and even attack people. The cult seems to have the most stories associated to it than any other myth. Let's go through a few to give you more of a perspective than me just telling you about them. The first story is by a user known as Ghost Hunter 92. I have never seen these shadow figures in the woods or the jacketed people, but one experience still gives me the chills. It was me and my old girlfriend. We loved going to the trails, usually with her little sister. Well, one night herself and I went for a good scare in the trails. We were in her car, I remember. It wasn't long before we encountered a vehicle on the trail. It seemed to follow us at a good distance behind us. The slow pace of the headlights was the creepy part. It wasn't trying to scare us, and it was moving too slow to just be other people exploring the trails. Well, after a few turns, we realized these headlights were following us. So we got up on a hill back in the woods and found a place to turn around. This is where I had the creepiest encounter ever. Even though it wasn't much, you had to see what I saw. Well, we turned around and went head on with this vehicle. As we got closer, we could tell it was a van packed full. While we steered to the edge of the road to pass by this van, slowly going past, I got a look at everyone. Each and every one of them was dressed in all black. I'm not sure if they were robes or not. When as I was staring at these people, none of them but one was looking at us. Everything was in slow motion to me, like some kind of horror movie. In the back seat, there was a young child that I came into direct eye contact with. His face was expressionless, but his eyes seemed to pierce right through you, and I had the feeling that he was pure evil. Something was very wrong with this kid. I don't know how to explain it. You're probably sitting there reading this thinking he was just looking at you, just like you were looking at him. But you had to be there. This kid seemed to be soulless. I just don't know how to explain it. Well, I'm not scared very easily, and this made me very uneasy, so I told my girlfriend we had to leave. This van turned around and followed us all the way back to town, then turned around. To me, these people looked kind of like a cult, but it was honestly too dark to tell. The next story is by a user known only as John. The Vergas Trails is not a place to mess around with. 15 years ago, my best friend Dave and I drove through these trails because people said it was a place for the scares. It's basically a bunch of small little dirt roads, but we decided to make a trip there the following weekend anyway. Dave was always a happy guy, never worried about a lot. The only place scary we found was a small cemetery on a hill, close to a ranch or a camp, not sure which. What I'm about to explain is actually terrifying. Our car shut off. The battery seemed to die. Not even minutes later, at least 20 men in white robes circled us and chanted on and on. Literally, I thought it was some kind of joke. They were speaking a language we both weren't fond of. We had no clue what was going on. They pounded, literally pounded hard on the window. After 10 minutes, they got in one single file line and marched back into the graveyard. But the last one turned and had a devilish glare in his eyes, bright red glowing at us. Then he spun around and almost like he vanished into thin air. The car began working once they were gone, but Dave wasn't the same. Turning pale and suddenly puking, I didn't know what was going on. His attitude turned angry and he started making these grunting sounds. This was happening the whole way back to International Falls the next morning. I received a phone call, and David hung himself in his grandparents' barn 15 miles outside of International Falls. Since then, my life has changed. From what people have told me, it's nothing more than a joke, but to me, it's hell on earth after what I encountered. The last story is from an anonymous user.
Me and my friends were driving through the Vergas Trails, a bunch of minimum maintenance roads that are haunted as hell. Anyways, we were at the old Camp Cherith graveyard at around 11:30 p.m. We left the car on and walked through the awning of the graveyard. Right away, the lights on the car shut off and wouldn't turn back on. Suddenly, we started to hear chanting, and about 100 people in white robes came marching down the road. Bubba told us to hide in a car with the lights off under the blankets as they approached the graveyard. They surrounded the car and chanted for about 20 minutes, occasionally banging on the glasses and shush. But I guess they didn't see us. Then Bubba started the car. Even though the lights still didn't work, we took off down the road. As soon as they heard the car, they came running after us. I never saw Bubba cry before, but I did that night.
There's a legend of a bridge in Vergas, and on this bridge many people would come to hang themselves over the creek. So many in fact that the road was closed off by one of the no trespassing signs. But if you happen to find this bridge and you decide to drive on it, your car will be swallowed up by a thick fog, and a woman only known as the Devil Woman will appear in front of your car. She will scream, and this scream will force you to also end your life on this bridge. Whether the scream takes control of you to make you kill yourself, or if the sound is so horrible it makes you kill yourself to make it stop, is unknown. Either way, it's best to stay on the path if you ever decide to take a trip to the Vergas trails. I'm sure if you made it this far through the video, you have heard of the cemetery located in the Vergas trails. However, what may surprise you is other than a strange fog on some full moons and Jason's supposed grave hidden somewhere on the grounds, the cemetery is actually very tame. But that doesn't mean the trails are not haunted. Many claim that ghost cars will pull up behind you and try to force you into a wreck. Others claim it's homeowners that just want you to take your bullshit elsewhere. However, it is said that these ghost cars have taken at least one group of victims. Decades ago, a school bus full of children coming home from school was forced off the road by one of these ghost cars. The bus crashed and fell down one of the steep sides of the trail into the lake. The bodies were never found. However, the children still haunt people who drive these roads. If you're taking a drive through the Vergas trails, you might notice that your windows will fog up. This will continue until you leave the Vergas trails. However, when you exit the Vergas trails, you will see small handprints in the fogged up glass. Handprints you're sure you didn't put there. If human spirits aren't your fancy, well then there's a rumored to be a pack of ghost dogs that maul anyone who ventures too far off the beaten path. Where these dogs came from is unknown, but people swear they are out there. However, most people assume that like every other story of the Vergas trails, it has been embellished to an extreme. And if there are dogs, it's a real living pack of wild dogs. Either way, they are said to be extremely vicious, so you might want to stay on the path. And of course, a paranormal hotspot would not be complete if not for some stories of otherworldly visitors. There have been claims of strange lights in the sky all over the Vergas trails, but most notably at the Telephone Pole Trails. The Telephone Pole Trails is a large field in the middle of the forest that is mysteriously barren with no trees in sight. Legend has it that if you're trying to seek otherworldly visitors, if you travel to the other side of the field, you will find your wish. And that's most of the stories of the Vergas trails. If you made it this far in the video, I hope you leave a like, maybe a comment letting me know what you think of the Vergas trails, and hopefully you subscribe for more creepy content. We do all the research so you don't have to. And as always, I'm Alex, and I hope you have a fantastic day.
And it cuts deeper than the roots of the trees that we planted in the graveyard. I don't think these scars will ever fade off. Good thing nothing seems to faze us. So numb.